Bonjour à tout le monde. Merci pour l'opportunité d'être là. I'm Rory O'Sullivan, CEO of Multex Energy Canada. But I'd first like to acknowledge that we're on the unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq and Pescataway peoples, a land that we've been fortunate to share with the First Nations who have welcomed us here for hundreds of years and who are excited, we're excited to include in the development of our clean energy future. You've heard that nuclear energy is not needed to fight climate change because decarbonisation is possible with only renewable sources. Solar and wind power and energy storage systems have all become much cheaper in recent years, and deployments of these technologies are growing exponentially. You've also heard that nuclear energy should be off the table because it comes with unacceptable risks. Nuclear power plants can have accidents during operation. They can be intentionally targeted and attacked by bad actors. They can produce waste that is hazardous for thousands of years, and it is possible for that waste to be made into weapons. All of these concerns are very reasonable and cannot be ignored. There's another list of concerns that I believe we can all agree on. Climate disruption is approaching or already passing tipping points that put humanity at an unacceptable risk. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average, in the process melting permafrost that is releasing methane, further accelerating warming. We all know the polar ice caps are melting, but it may be underappreciated that as ice melts, it cools the atmosphere the same way melting a block of ice can be used to cool a room. It helps to hold the temperature down until the ice is gone. Already a long time before the last of the northern ice has melted, we are hitting new records of extreme weather and new extremes of impacts on human health, safety and infrastructure every year. Every year, the news is covering another once-in-a-generation storm, heat wave or other extreme weather system. And with that comes more population displacement and international tension. I think we can agree this is an all-hands-on-deck moment. We cannot afford to delay decisive action to address this climate crisis. Our federal government has recognised this fact and set aggressive timeframes for phasing out fossil fuels. And I'm sure we all know meeting these goals will require massive infrastructure development. I think we can also agree that we can't afford to decarbonise in a way that puts our energy reliability, resilience or security at risk, or in a way that cripples our economy with excessive energy costs, or by losing good-paying, long-term jobs that Canadian families rely on for their incomes. And finally, I think we can agree that there is huge opportunity in the energy transition, and that Canada can make the right decisions today that will set us up for success, not only in our domestic energy supply, but also for export and economic growth through technology leadership on the global stage, as well as inclusion of First Nations in our clean energy future. So again, I'm hoping we can agree our number one common enemy is the climate crisis. If we believe the science, the impacts of climate change are just barely getting started. Even setting the science aside for a moment, I think we can all see the trend of increasing volatility and new extremes in the headlines and in our own direct experience. There are further complications to our dependence on oil, coal and gas. As a planet, we are still increasing our carbon emissions year after year. And our reliance on fossil fuels has been weaponized in the past year by an autocratic aggressor, Russia, threatening our democratic allies in Europe. We need to end fossil fuel dependence as fast as possible, but we need to do so without causing our power grids or our economies to collapse in the process. To guide our approach to decarbonisation, we have the benefit of learning from international examples. Germany tried the route of decommissioning nuclear plants and investing heavily in renewables. In the past 25 years, Germany spent over $750 billion Canadian dollars. It's $750 billion Canadian dollars to get to 45% renewable energy on their grid, while reducing nuclear to just 12% of the energy mix. With that approach, they still need to burn gas and coal to maintain a stable grid. Last year, Germany's carbon intensity was about 350 grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour. And it cost their ratepayers about 40 cents Canadian per kilowatt hour. Naturally, the more than $500 billion Germany has invested in renewable energy started with the low-hanging fruit. To phase out fossil energy and nuclear entirely and operate on renewable energy and energy storage alone, Germany estimates they would need to invest a further $5 trillion US dollars, tenfold more than they have already spent in the past 25 years. And already, the cost of electricity for ratepayers in Germany is about 45% higher than the average cost of electricity in the European Union. Hopefully, we can agree that is not a path that New Brunswick wants to follow. Compare Germany to New Brunswick today. Germany has spent hundreds of billions of dollars to get to 45% renewables, 12% nuclear, and 43% fossil energy. For that investment, they got to 350 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, as I said, and electricity rates of 40 cents per kilowatt hour. New Brunswick, in contrast, has 40% nuclear, 30% renewable, and about 30% fossil generation. Our carbon intensity is better than Germany's at about 290 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. And our costs are almost a third, at about 14 cents per kilowatt hour, some of the lowest in the world. We have achieved this level of success even though plant refurbishments in the past decade have not always gone to plan. And we owe a debt of gratitude to MB Power for being a world-class nuclear operator and for making good energy procurement decisions. I think we all know if we didn't do the refurb, we would have another coal plant operating in New Brunswick now, and those numbers would be drastically different. Though we can't ignore the majority of our renewable energy sources comes from hydropower, and we rely on Quebec for significant energy imports, which they won't guarantee when we need it most. With only about 2/3 as much renewable energy in our mix as Germany has, but a bit more than 3 times as much nuclear, our carbon intensity is lower and our costs much lower. We can look at Germany as an example of what happens when renewables alone are prioritized and nuclear is decommissioned. For an example of what happens when nuclear plays a bigger role, we can look right next door at Ontario. Ontario gets about 2/3 of their power from nuclear, a third from renewables, and only about 6% from fossil generation. Ontario's energy mix achieves a world-leading carbon intensity of only 25 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour, an order of magnitude lower than Germany and New Brunswick. And it only costs Ontario's ratepayers 12 cents per kilowatt hour, much better than Germany and even better than we've achieved here in New Brunswick. New Brunswick and Ontario have accomplished lower carbon emissions per kilowatt hour of power produced and a much lower cost than Germany. We've done this with our proudly Canadian CANDU reactor technology that supports about 76,000 permanent high-paying jobs across Canada, from mining our domestic secure uranium fuel supply to operating our power plants at over 92% capacity factor. We have a truly Tier 1 nuclear sector in Canada. Those are important jobs to protect and to build on. For decarbonisation, energy security, cost to ratepayers and job creation, if you had to choose between following Germany or Ontario, which would you choose? Securing reliable, affordable, low-carbon energy for New Brunswick is an economic multiplier. The world's largest companies are making carbon pledges and are being required by investors to disclose their carbon footprints. What this means is that any jurisdiction that can offer a reliable, resilient, low-carbon grid will attract data centres and high-tech industry. But all else equal, cost will always be a factor. As grids around the world move towards decarbonisation, those that do it most cost-effectively will enjoy economic growth advantages over those that are more expensive. If we agree that it's important to keep dollars in Canada rather than sending them overseas, then we should also agree that it matters where we shop for our technologies. If we're investing in solar panels, wind turbines and batteries, are we buying those components from the Canadian supply chain and from our allies? According to the IEA, the International Energy Agency, China controls more than 80% of all stages of global solar panel manufacturing. The Chinese government set a clear policy years ago to dominate the global solar market and has invested over $50 billion in manufacturing capacity, more than 10 times greater than Europe's investment into solar panel production. China has staffed their solar panel factories with over 300,000 extremely low-paid workers. Solar panel production has become a global commodity market where Canada has no comparative advantage to compete with a low-wage manufacturing giant like China. Battery production is going the same way, easily dominated by China and South Korea. As we plan the decarbonization of our economy, are we also committed to creating permanent, high-skilled, high-paying energy sector jobs that our skilled operators can step into as we shut down existing coal and gas plants? Or are we creating short-term, lower-skilled construction jobs that disappear once renewable energy systems are installed? Has anyone ever seen a parking lot at a solar field or at a wind farm? Are our energy infrastructure choices also choosing good incomes for Canadian families, or are we choosing to empower foreign economies that openly oppose democratic values? Regarding safety during operations, when we think about operational risk and intentional attacks on energy infrastructure, it's important to think about risks relative to other options. It's common knowledge that per megawatt hour of energy produced, nuclear energy has the best track record of any energy technology, period. Nuclear energy has caused fewer injuries and deaths per megawatt hour of energy produced than any other source of power, including solar, including wind, and very obviously including fossil fuels, which at present kill over 1 million people each year just from lung disease, even without considering the impacts of climate change. In terms of energy security, any energy infrastructure can be targeted, and Russia has shelled every part of Ukraine's energy grid. Ukrainian grid operators there have told us that their nuclear plants took multiple direct hits and were the only part of the system to not break down. Independent United Nations monitors have confirmed that there has been no hazardous release of radioactive material. Ukraine's nuclear plants have proven to be the most secure, safest part of their entire energy system. There is no energy system that comes without risk, but among the available options, there's no energy system that has a better track record of safety than nuclear. Even without intentional attacks, renewable energy systems can be destroyed by strong winds, and we're already talked about the windstorms getting stronger and more frequent. Now, I want to be clear that we 100% support renewable energy and recognise its role in decarbonisation. It must be part of the mix. But I want to be equally clear, we view a renewable energy-only strategy as a one-legged stool. Power grids need diversity of energy resources to be optimal, stable, resilient, and cost-effective. On the topic of toxicity, nuclear waste can last for centuries. But radioactivity is by definition a decay process. Heavy metals, on the other hand, including lead, mercury, cobalt, which are used in renewable energy systems, are permanent toxins. They don't have a half-life because they never break down or decay at all. They're toxic literally forever. Our global demand for renewable energy technologies is digging up these toxins and introducing them into our water tables at an unprecedented rate. Again, to be clear, this is not to say renewable energy is bad. It's not. Only to say, when we talk about the impacts of energy technologies, we need to talk in relative terms. Relative to what alternative? Fossil waste is clearly the worst. Nuclear waste is much more easily contained and is being safely managed today. Renewable energy waste includes permanent toxins and large space requirements. The strategy that hits the optimal balance of impacts from waste and land use while achieving energy reliability, resilience, security and affordability will account for the relative impacts of all options and will certainly include nuclear, renewable and energy storage technologies. There is one risk that comes with nuclear energy that is different to any other energy source. A conventional nuclear reactor fissions uranium, and when it does, new elements are created that are not found in nature. One of those elements is plutonium, which, when highly purified, can be used to make a nuclear explosive device. Plutonium is radioactive for hundreds of thousands of years, and at present it is stored on site at surface storage as part of the spent fuel, where it's produced alongside existing nuclear power plants within the used fuel bundles from the existing reactors. Multex Canada was founded to address all of the above issues we've been talking about. We recognise the climate crisis is our greatest threat and we must end fossil fuel dependence. We see nuclear as a key technology to decarbonise safely, securely and cost-effectively. And we have developed a reactor design that does not use fresh uranium. Instead, we will take the used nuclear fuel sitting alongside Canada's existing reactors, take out the long-lived radioactive elements, including plutonium, and fission that material as fuel in our reactor. By doing this in New Brunswick, with nothing but the spent fuel sitting at Point Lepreau, we can produce 300 megawatts of clean power. That's enough to power 212,000 Canadian homes reliably, securely, with no imported fuel or supply chain risk, in any weather, any day of the year for 60 years. And in the process, the plutonium consumed as fuel is destroyed, greatly reducing the risk of that material ever being used for a malign purpose. You've heard that reprocessing nuclear fuel creates a proliferation risk. That is true if the process used can produce pure plutonium. For this reason, Multex has designed a process that is technically classed as fuel recycling as opposed to fuel reprocessing. Our technology extracts elements from used nuclear fuel that are suitable to fuel our reactor, but at a purity level that has no possibility of being used to produce a nuclear explosive device. Rather than being able to produce pure plutonium, our technology will produce a mixed chloride fuel salt that cannot be used to make any explosive, nuclear explosive. In our reactor, this hazardous material burns up safely, converting it to carbon-free energy. Once plutonium is used as fuel, that hazard material that exists today is gone. This is not combustion like burning fossil fuels. This is Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. We're literally turning matter into a lot of energy, with a kilo of nuclear fuel safely releasing more energy than there is in over 1 million kilos of coal. And through this process, radioactive material goes away. Along with reducing proliferation risk, we're also reducing the volume of nuclear waste that needs final disposal. The issues we have covered here are well understood by grid operators in Canada. MB Power knows that nuclear is necessary for a low-carbon, secure, reliable, affordable power sector. Multex Energy Canada set up our global headquarters in St. John because of MB Power's vision back in 2018. And we've brought technology leadership and about 30 high-skilled, well-paid jobs to the province so far, with plans to double this year. Other utilities and other jurisdictions have followed suit, and some have poured in more resources and overtaken us in some areas. For instance, the SMR startups from the US have received orders of magnitude more funding and have completed design certification ahead of us. But according to independent third-party nuclear scientists who have reviewed our design, of all the molten salt reactor concepts in the world today, the Multex reactor is by far the best. We're the only fully Canadian SMR company backed by a utility. All of the IP is Canadian with the New Brunswick registered company. And we're the only one in the world focused on addressing the critical issue of waste. We have unique Canadian-owned IP and a strong head start in bringing a vital solution to market that will address nuclear waste and the need for firm, reliable, carbon-free power. Despite the challenges we're facing, and in some ways actually because of those same challenges, we have every reason to be optimistic for our future as a province. Globally, attention is on the climate crisis like never before. Emissions have not come down worldwide, but they have also not gone up as fast as they were projected in years past. We've already avoided the worst-case projections. Our ability to focus and innovate when the need arises has never failed us yet. And the leaders in government and energy in New Brunswick are pragmatic and forward-thinking. Together, we can show the world a best-yet version of what is possible. Canada invented insulin, pacemakers, time zones, and basketball. Canada invented the can-do technology, an incredible technology that has made our energy grids world leaders in low-carbon, safe, reliable, affordable energy. We can build on this success and do even better. We can become a magnet for tech talent and companies needing clean energy, and we can export solutions we develop here to our allies around the world. We're committed to New Brunswick and committed to helping build a clean energy technology ecosystem that secures our domestic energy supply and drives economic growth for the province. Because of our approach and vision, all 15 of the First Station communities in New Brunswick have indicated their support toward the development of small modular reactors in New Brunswick, but they've been clear they want to be at the table and don't want to be left behind. And last year, 9 out of 10 New Brunswickers responded that they support recycling used nuclear fuel at Point Lepreau. We are committed to following through and delivering the solutions that the world, our province, and New Brunswickers are asking for. We look to the province to hold strong to the vision that brought us here when MB Power put out a solicitation for small modular reactors in 2018. Hold that vision and follow through with us Let's prove to ourselves and to the world that New Brunswick can do when we put our minds to it, when we all pull together. Thank you.